This is Jenna, and she's doing all the kind of the behind the scenes and the facilitating. So thank you so much, because this would be a lot harder to do without Jenna here. And I will introduce our guest speakers in just a second. My name is Allison, and I'm a community facilitator for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic region of the United States, also Canada, and I also lead one community in Africa. And we started this series right when the pandemic started, so that we could offer an online discussion for people feeling impacted and wanting to connect online. And what we're trying to do is envision a society together that's trauma informed. And we have been touching on various topics related to COVID-19 trauma, such as racial equity, housing. We did a great one on housing. What have been some of the other topics, Jenna? Education, we do every Thursday, like K through 12 education. We did a great one on trauma-informed yoga a couple weeks ago. And violence prevention, we've done quite a few on those. So I hope if this is your first time that you'll consider coming back and joining us for further discussions and helping us envision a trauma-informed society and things that we can do to move the needle on that. So this is the first one that we're doing on higher education. I just graduated from Boston University School of Public Health, and so did Jenna, and my colleague at ACES Connection. And I graduated from my undergrad in 2009 during the height of the economic recession. And so that was really tough. It took me 3 years to land a full-time job. And it took me, I think 4 or 5 years to land a full-time job with benefits. So that impacted me a lot. And this is really important to kind of think about the different fallout that we're going to see from people being hit really hard from loss of job opportunities. And then, lots of other issues coming up around disparities in access to resources, and as well as issues such as homelessness or food insecurity. So there's a lot to touch on for students in higher education. And so I hope that you will participate in the discussion. If you just joined, I invite any of you who can and are able to join with video, because this is a discussion format as opposed to a webinar format. And again, thank you so much for joining. Hi, Mary, another BU School Public Health. So let me introduce our amazing panelists today. And I haven't seen Ingrid. Have you, Jenna? Okay. Today we're joined by Carol Dolan, PhD, who's the Clinical Associate Professor of Community Health Sciences at Boston University School of Public Health. And she focuses on social contextual determinants of health and mental health, and serves as the director of the Certificate in Mental Health and Substance Use within the MPH degree program. And she teaches courses on individual, community, and population health, stress, mental health, and psychological trauma, and mentors students. And prior to being at BU, she taught undergraduate, graduate, and online courses in psychology and research to military members and their families stationed in Asia and Europe. And her research focuses on stress, coping and health, and cardiovascular health, deployed military members, and minority women. And she has experience counseling members of the military and their families with a focus on how deployments and trauma affect families. So we're so glad that Carol is here to join us. And I'd also like to introduce Laura Hoffman, who's an adjunct faculty career counselor and instructor at Miramar College in San Diego. She holds a Master's of Education in Counseling and Guidance for Higher Education from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and her Bachelor of Arts in Cultural Anthropology is from UC Berkeley. And her career in education and counseling spans nearly 15 years, with time in adult and youth career services at Miramar College, Ohlone Community College, UC Berkeley, City of Santa Maria in California, and the Federal Workforce Investment Act program. As a first-generation college student, she is very passionate about encouraging students to bring art, culture, and their passions into their time as a student. And I'm looking forward for her to share some of the ways that she encourages her students to do that. So Great. So without further ado, I'd like to get this conversation started. And I think that a lot of us are feeling especially raw today in light of the events related to the racial injustice that's happening in the United States right now. And so we do want to make sure that we talk a little bit about that. Carol, you had some really wonderful comments before we went live. And so I'd like to just kind of open it up for you to start us off here.
Okay. Thanks, Allison. First, I'd like to say hello to Laura, my co-panelist, and hello again to Jenna. And a special thank you to Allison for inviting me to participate in this incredibly interesting, timely, and helpful series, A Better Normal. The current pandemic and the events occurring around the death of George Floyd, I think, have left all of us with this wide range of emotions and not really so many places to process those because of our current situations of working from home and being a little bit more socially isolated than we would be. Those emotions are anger and rage, fear and anxiety, sadness and hopelessness. I think a lot of us might be feeling a bit overwhelmed. And I think a really important thing to remember around teaching in higher education is that not only our students, but our teaching assistants and our fellow faculty have all experienced some loss this year, some hurt, some more than others. And, I think this is something that makes going into the next 6 months, say, a lot more challenging. For those of us who study, research, and teach about trauma, we all know the long-term impact of not being able to heal from hurt. It can result in emotional dysregulation of our normal responses to stress. And that dysregulation can make it very challenging to stay focused, to learn, to thrive. So at this moment in time, we all need to heal. But we have these ongoing stressful situations. So it's kind of this unrelenting, just barrage of stressors. But healing can take place in many forms, right? And I think what's going on in the world can offer us a lot of opportunities, as the title of this series says, to build a better normal. I keep thinking that so many people want the world to go back to normal. And I think we're not really taking the moment to say, what wasn't working with the old normal and how can we do it better? And I think, we really need to get a conversation going about it, and not just in the ACEs Connections situation, but everywhere. In the classroom, we can offer a trauma-informed approach to teaching. And I think that is a strategy that we can all benefit from. Everybody that's a student, everybody who's the teacher, the teaching assistants, the staff can benefit from a trauma-informed approach. So, as we talk this hour, I'd like to offer some tips and examples, things that we do as educators to establish a trauma-aware and healing-centered classroom. With so much uncertainty, we don't know whether it's going to be a typical physical classroom, but if it is, it'll probably be physically distanced, people with masks. It might be a totally virtual setting like we've experienced in the last few months, or a hybrid combined approach, right? Whatever we have, I think educators really strive to offer the best they can for their students. And we do a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about, but we might not have called it trauma-informed. So a lot of this isn't new. It's just kind of packaged a little bit different. But given the pandemic and the current unrest around social inequities and racism, I think we have to be particularly aware that many of us, our students, our staff, our colleagues, ourselves, have experienced this loss, this hurt. And what we find out is that a dysregulated educator is not going to be very effective, especially with students who are also dysregulated. As we learned from Elaine Miller-Karras, learning and growth happen in the resilience zone with regulated arousal that we can manage, where we have the best opportunity and the best capacity for being flexible and for being adaptable. So I'm not sure how many of you in the room are higher education instructors, but there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of the course itself, how we run our class sessions, how we interact with our students, that can really contribute to a sense of connection, a sense of safety, and a sense of, here is a place I can go and I can be accepted, right? So even before the course begins, we might want to have a rethink about the curriculum. What are the goals and objectives of the course? Maybe get some input from former students or colleagues. What could be revised? What could be tweaked a little bit for a kinder, gentler course that still meets our academic course objectives, of course. And then before each session, I think each instructor wants to check in with themselves. Like, how am I doing? Practice a bit of self-care, get grounded, use some kind of a stress reduction technique to get yourself ready. My classes go for nearly 3 hours. And that's a long time to stay focused, to stay centered, to stay connected. And it's hard on the instructors as well as on the students. And during the semester, really trying to set some healthy boundaries in terms of reasonable work hours and managing the balance between life and work. All of those things make for a happier, healthier instructor who can then be a little bit more aware of these trauma-informed principles. In the classroom, there's a lot of strategies for addressing the basic principles. And I think this particular audience knows about the trauma-informed principles as put out by many sources like SAMHSA, for example. Also, I think Janice is a member of ACES Connection, but I want to shout out to Janice Corello, who has a great website called Trauma Informed Teaching. And there's really, really good resources there for strategies that one can take on, in tips and examples of things you can do in the classroom to engender a trauma-informed situation. So if you want to, I think one of the basic tenets of being trauma-informed is to provide a safe, respectful, accepting environment for students. So I think acknowledging, normalizing, and discussing difficult situations that are coming up in the news, that are coming up in the community, is really, really important. It's a really good time to be good listeners, to be empathetic, and structurally, it might not be a bad idea to offer kind of content warnings for students, just so I think a sense of safety is engendered when they know what's going to happen in that class that day. In terms of kind of getting a trustworthy class, creating class rituals, I think are also really, really helpful. Tell students what you're doing in a session, and share that class agenda and stick with it as best you can. In rituals, like when we were coming back from break, I'd ask students a fun icebreaker. Like one, just for example, when we were remote, was to pull a photo off the web of a place in the world that you would like to be right now. And it was really kind of fun just to have students share their ideal vacation spot or their favorite getaway. One student actually took a picture of her screen, which was really quite surprising that the one place she wanted to be was right there in class. Also, we can offer as much kind of collaboration and mutuality and empowerment to students as possible in terms of their having some voice in what happens in the classroom. And I think Laura's going to talk a little bit about the social justice and equity issues, but it's really important to notice that each student is going through something different. We don't need to know what it is, right? We just need to know that our capacity for compassion and empathy has to be kind of steady in order for students to feel safe and comfortable. So I think I'll just stop there and hand it over back to Allison.
Thanks so much, Carol. I forgot to mention to everyone that we invite you to participate in this discussion by typing your comments in the chat. And then when we open it up to discussion, then Jenna will call on you to share your comment out loud with the group. So feel free to participate. Some of you are utilizing the chat. We encourage all of you to do so. You can write questions, comments, provide resources and links. So please do that. And Carol, your comments, made me think is that trauma-informed supports education directly in the primary goals of achieving the education, because if students are showing up to class and they're dysregulated, they're not going to be able to do their work. And that's like the primary goal, right? Is to learn and produce, especially in a master's degree program, is are we producing really high quality work that's, changing our discipline? And if faculty and staff are not even kind of understanding the basics of trauma science and adverse childhood experiences science, then we're not really having the leaders that we need who are understanding why a student may come to class and they're not able to focus or they're not able to complete their work. And that's been really frustrating. And, hardly any instructors are trauma-informed, which is so surprising, even at public health. So does that ever get you discouraged?
Well, I think, like I was saying, that despite the chaos that this pandemic has wrought upon us, and all of the unrest and lack of ease that we're experiencing currently, I think it's also offering us these opportunities to teach each other and to learn from each other about ways to go forward and make it a different and better normal, right?
Yeah, that's true. So we welcome anyone to share any of your thoughts or ideas in the chat. So now I want to turn it over to Laura, who has a little bit of a presentation to share with us about something that when I was writing this up, I thought, gosh, that sounds really cool. An empowered personalized equity plan. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, Laura.
Yes. So I'm going to be borrowing from many different aspects of the culture of our campus, our community college campus, because it's multi-level. There's a campus level, there's a classroom level, and then when students go beyond our campus, there's this kind of community level or labor market level. And so I'm going to touch on all of those things. And excuse me while I sort of read off of something if I'm looking down. So I have these two roles. I'm in the Career Center and I'm helping students along the way. They may be looking for internships, job opportunities, and they come in, or in this case, we're meeting with them remotely, and they have all of these concerns about things that are very practical, like very logistic level, like how do I network with people? Can you please look over my resume? I have an interview coming up and I'd like to practice my interview skills. And they're very, very practical things. And over the many years that I've worked in this field, I realized that it's really a holistic thing, because the person that I see in front of me with this very pragmatic issue that they need help with, when you start to unpack it and get to know them, you find out this human story. Like they may have anxiety tied to interviewing or networking. They may be first generation and never had this opportunity to even write a resume. And they may have gone through their classes without an assignment to write a resume, and all these things that for those of us further along in our career, we may take for granted that they know or have learned along the way. And so I think that is kind of a misconception about career counseling, is that it's all about these practical ways to get a job, get an internship, graduate, pick a major, all these things. And really over the years, I became more and more interested in just the story behind the person before they came to sit in my office that day. And that is where I have found the most power in being able to help each student who comes to me. And just hearing their stories, are they immigrants? Are they single parents? Are they low income? Are they undocumented? Are they dealing with housing insecurity, food insecurity? And that becomes just as important, because of what Allison is talking about and what Carol is talking about is if someone has experienced trauma, or they're in their past, or they're currently experiencing trauma, then they can do as well as they want with a resume. We can help them do well in an interview, but long term, will they be successful finishing their degree or succeeding in that job, right? And then you can take away all the gains that they just got if they're not able to complete those long-term goals. So that is really what led me to become so interested in trauma-informed education. And then being in the role of an instructor, I realized that I had this captive audience to help in so many ways that for myself as a first-generation college student, I wish I had known about all of these things that could really get in my way. And by the same token, all of the different resources that could help me. And on that note, I'd like to say that we are so lucky where we're at right now. We have a lot of growing to do as a country, as a society. But I can tell you in our little microcosm of the community college, I am always telling the students, you all are so lucky. You have such amazing resources that would have changed my life had I had them. And this is at a campus level. So some of the things that happened immediately with the shutdown were we began to distribute laptops to students. We gave them information to access internet so they could still take their classes and have high-speed internet. There was a Wi-Fi campus lot opened, even though the campus was closed. The lot was open to students so that they could get fast internet access if necessary and keep being able to log into those classes that had suddenly gone completely online. We have a food bank. We have food available to students. We help them with their CalFresh or EBT cards so they can be able to keep getting food. There were also, we got through through federal funding, something called the CARES grant. And so that was for emergency funding. I think it was about $300 or $350, which I personally saw the effect for a student that I know who stopped getting the, I'm forgetting what it's called, the, where they're divorced and they're getting, what's that called, you guys? My recall is terrible. Child support, like the child support. She stopped getting it because her ex was no longer working, and this $350 came, and it just made all the difference for her to be able to buy food. So I can tell you, even that small amount helps students. She graduated with all A's this last semester. So, you know, these things do matter. And continuing with these services that we offer students. So there are virtual student mental health appointments still available for any student who's struggling with physical, mental issues. That is available remotely. And we still have the academic skills tutoring for English, math, any of the classes available, and special services still available remotely for students with disabilities, veterans. And I have to say, with how terrifying it was for everyone, staff, faculty, students, you know, alike, it was heartening what we could do as a campus to truly just wrap our arms around the students. And it felt that, you know, no job would be too big for us to come in and help our students. So we were even helping students with information about moratoriums on eviction so that nobody would end up without a home. And it was very like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, let's take care of these base level human basic needs. And there were countless webinars about that, about meeting the basic needs of students. I will say that for myself, my class that I taught, which is career and life planning, is a wonderful class about self-exploration, getting to know yourself, a lot of work on identity, definitely talking a lot about the past, which is a really good opportunity to bring up issues about trauma and how that may or may not affect your graduation and your success in college and on the job. But, you know, thinking about how we as a whole campus could take a step back and kind of take away some of these things that across the board, faculty would say, well, this is the due date for an assignment and we're not going to budge on that. And suddenly with this pandemic, it was like, well, let's talk about an extension, you know? And I think for some people who had been teaching for a long time, that was unheard of, to budge on a due date. And suddenly that became the least of our worries. And I have a different approach about due dates. I've always been, you know, someone saying, communicate, let me know, realizing that people can have transportation issues, childcare issues, other things can be going on financially or with mental health or physical wellness that could get in the way of them completing an assignment. And changing our view in terms of, we're not making a student prove that they need it. It's that we believe our students. And that goes a long way in dealing with trauma, because trauma of all sorts is hard to process or get support on if you feel that you have to convince people to first believe you that you were affected by trauma. And just to take away that you don't have to convince me, I believe you, I trust you. If you need more time, just please communicate and let me know. And what was interesting is that even though my class was already online, I could still notice the shift when I knew that the rest of the classes that one of my students was maybe taking were now all online. You could see a difference when everything kind of, went online, because there was still an impact. And I still lost some students who, while I gave every resource and I said, just talk to me, let me know, is that they couldn't, even with all the support, couldn't make it happen. For example, a single mother or someone who ended up having mold in their home and had to leave suddenly, like relocate. And I think at some point, people will break no matter how much support they have. And I think that even then, even if you see that someone isn't able to take advantage of the support that we can give them as trauma-informed educators, we can even help them. And it's, hopefully this is not too intense, but, thinking about what we do in the sense of someone who works in hospice. How do you help someone die? How do you help someone let go of life? Well, sometimes we have to be almost like hospice providers with our students in terms of, how do we help you with grace and dignity let go of a whole load of classes that you were really looking forward to, and still show our students dignity and not make them feel that, well, you gave up, or why didn't you just take advantage of all these wonderful resources, showing them dignity even as they have to bow out, and saying, well, I understand, please know that here's all the resources of how you can withdraw and get your money back, or, take an incomplete instead of feeling like you ruined your GPA. And do you see what I'm saying there? It's like, even in the letting go of something, we can still hold a really important space with our students. So on that note, and I am kind of going to the equity piece, is, starting at the basic kind of ground level and then working our way up, is as faculty, I've been fortunate enough to participate in a faculty research institute, which is the first for our region. And it is in partnership with the Center for Excellence, which is all about labor market information for California community colleges, which I realize we have a really diverse geographic group here. But if anybody's interested in this, I love researching this information for any county, any state. You can contact me and I would love to help you find your relevant information for your county. It's very interesting. And what we're doing is we're looking at the labor market research for our county, and we're comparing that with the demographics of race and ethnicity for our classes, like at the level of our own classes. What's the demographic makeup, and who is not only staying in class, but doing well in class, which is a C or higher. And then of those people who do well in our class, how many actually graduate from our community college with a certificate or with an associate's, or who transfer, or who are able to leave and become employed in living wage payable jobs, which is all really important. So in the Institute, we're having these beautiful conversations similar to what's happening today, which is, how can we be trauma informed? And it's almost like a clutch system in a car. By being trauma informed, you have to relinquish some of your power as, I'm the expert at a career and life planning class, oh, well, I tell my students all the time, I happen to have focused on this, but guess what? If you put me in a machine shop with any of you who know how to do welding, suddenly the power dynamic is shifted and I'm looking at you of how to do something. So really bringing that empowerment to students and saying, we're all experts at something. And this is a community here in this class, and opening it up to a place of trust where students can feel that there's less of a power differential, and that they can ask without repercussions for things like extensions, or share without shame the fact that they're a single parent or taking care of an elderly relative or whatever it is. So as part of that, and in an effort to support our students, I began to research some things that were really interesting about the labor market, and especially in light of the pandemic. And I'll try to make it really short because I don't want to take up all the time, but I'm going to share my screen here and just kind of guide you through this information that I want to, I do share with students, and I want to continue sharing with students so that they can be empowered in terms of, they can choose any major they want, because a lot of times I show this to students and they're thinking, oh, does that mean I should change my major? No, you should think about how would you most strategically apply your major. And the reason that this all ties into equity and race is because from the very beginning, this is from the National Center for Education Statistics, and it shows, I have a feeling this will not come as a surprise to anybody, the attainment of associates and bachelor's degrees. And I'm not so much looking at the gender over here for this, but I'm just wanting to demonstrate that it's still the case that white, Caucasian, and Asian Pacific Islanders graduate with associates and bachelor's degrees at higher rates than Black and Hispanic counterparts. So that's where it starts. It starts with an inequity of who is achieving their degrees. And that can have a lot to do with the disproportionately impacted ethnicities that experience more trauma. We know that from the data that is coming out about trauma-informed education, is that there are populations that experience more trauma. It directly affects their ability to not just enroll in school. That was 10 years ago that we cared about enrollment. Now we know enrollment practically means nothing to the outcomes of whether they can actually leave with their degree and get either a degree or transfer or be in a living wage job. So there's that, right? And then we move over to the earnings. So this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I will make it a bit bigger for you here. And what it's showing is that, of course, whoops, sorry about that. With a doctoral degree, higher education, you're going to be earning a lot more money. You're way over here. And your unemployment rate is really low. Do you see that? Higher education means higher earnings, and you're not immune to unemployment, but it goes down. Same with the master's degree. You earn more money, and your chances of being unemployed are lower. And same with the associate's degree. But those who have a high school diploma only, no college, or less than an associate's degree, they are the ones that are at risk, especially in a pandemic, of being unemployed. And it goes to show that by the same token, they have less savings, they can less afford a bout of unemployment. So you have the people up here who probably have savings and can afford to be without work for a bit, and they don't have to worry about it because they're rarely unemployed. That's important for me when I'm working with my students and as a career counselor, because I want to show them, yes, this is a huge investment. Yes, Allison talks a lot about student loan debt. Yes, there is that, but there's financial aid, there's scholarships, and this is a very important investment, and it could be your ticket out of poverty, and it could help you long-term to have job security. And this one here is kind of similar. It's the same kind of graph, but it's showing you kind of head to head, so it's a little bit easier to see how less unemployment, more money. This is important too in terms of COVID-19 is that now this is kind of interesting because over here you can see that there's some pretty high paying jobs like a doctor where you will earn a lot of money, but you will be exposed quite a bit to COVID-19. So there is some of that, the frontline workers, doctors, nurses, dentists, they're going to earn a lot of money and they're going to have high exposure, but it's not that many. And then you look over here to the left and you have these CEOs, marketing managers, lawyers, some engineers. They make a lot of money. Their risk is really low of being exposed to COVID-19. And it goes to show either way, whether you have high or low exposure, that all of these positions here require higher education. This is a bachelor's degree or higher of education. So there's a matchup between pay risk of unemployment, and in this case, some small exposure to COVID-19. But check out what happens down here. These lower wage workers here, so less degree requirements, they are earning less money. And look at the ones over here. These are our frontline workers who right now are struggling with not even having enough personal protection equipment on the front lines, being exposed to COVID-19 for, let's say, $50,000 a year. Now, again, I'm not going to be telling students what to major in, but I want to educate them. And I think that's part of equity. I think that's part of empowerment, is empowering them with information and saying, let's look at the data. Let's look at what we know about risk, long-term risks, and your employment ability. And going into this is just a couple more layers that I want to give you guys for food for thought, which I share all of this with my students, is the ones who are most vulnerable for layoffs are these sectors here: food and beverage, clothing and retail. And they employ the most people because our society is built up by the service sector, and yet the wages are of the lowest. So it's the same thing: low wages, less educational attainment, more vulnerable to unemployment. And I think that's it. I don't have the graph for that I can share with you guys because it's only for San Diego County, but I guess my final comment is that I have another chart for San Diego County, which shows that the positions that are most able to work from home follow the same pattern of higher wages and higher educational attainment. And that kind of brings it full circle back to, are these our Black, Hispanic students who are already struggling, who are able to get higher education, guard against unemployment to the best they can, be paid higher, and choose whether or not they're exposed to COVID-19? I mean, hopefully there's a vaccine coming up soon, but this is kind of what we're dealing with. So talking about the beginning with George Floyd and these really difficult conversations that we have to have, this is also a difficult conversation. I don't want to depress my students. I don't want to scare them, but I want to say this is what we're dealing with. And we do a disservice to our students when we shy away from hard conversations. So I am willing to have hard conversations with my students, and by that empower them and make them aware of the way that they can think of this information to make a plan for themselves and utilize career services, but also the campus resources.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was amazing. I learned so much from that. Wow. I want to open it up to comments from those of you. Laura, do you mind stopping your screen share?
Yeah.
I can't find the button on my end. So awesome. Thank you so much. Carol, do you have anything that you want to say quickly in response to Laura, and then we'll open it up to the community? Let me unmute you. Can you, I think, oh, there we go.
It was really,
oh, there it is.
Thanks, Laura. That was really informative. And, a community college is a place where the social determinants of health are so right there. And I think those of us who are in higher education at, say, perhaps private schools that are pretty high tuition, we kind of forget. And then when we're confronted with the idea that our students are experiencing all those things that Laura kind of sees every day, I think a lot of us were have been kind of like, wow. And but I think given all of the turmoil going on this year, we're going to see more of that, and we have to be aware of that. When we had this disruption in March, when classes went remote, many of my students had to pack up and leave their living space in a very, very quick and inefficient way, and highly stressful way, and for many a very expensive way, where they were paying rent and had leases. And so I think we're going to see more and more of these kind of social determinants coming into our classroom and affecting the way our students can participate and be empowered, as Laura was talking about, to finish their degrees and get out there and do the work of public health. But yeah, great talk, Laura.
Thanks so much, Carol. Jenna, we've had quite a few comments. And so do you want to go ahead and call on the first one?
Sure. Victoria Burns, do you want me to unmute you and you can share what you had to say in the chat? You should be unmuted now.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Carol, and thanks, Laura, for your presentations. I was just thinking of Carol at the beginning when you're talking about the importance of trauma-informed classrooms, and where I teach, it's still definitely not the norm, but with social work classes, there's a lot of, it's not didactic teaching often. It's very, it's use of self and a lot of sharing, intimate sharing going on. And I've just found that I've had colleagues say, I feel like I need to start teaching again just using PowerPoint because I'm overwhelmed with with the amount of trauma that, and vicarious trauma that they're experiencing, because the classroom does become like a therapy session almost. And by opening up by opening up that space and allowing people to be seen and heard, sometimes we have this really in-depth conversation, and then it's like, people are crying or whatever, things come up, like a can of worms is opened, and then I don't have anywhere to send people almost. So they're in my office, and there's one of me, and then so it's having that boundary, I guess, of I'm an educator, I'm also a social worker, so I do wear those two hats. But I'm just wondering if this is something you bump up against in your work and how you manage that.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. You're our friend in Alberta, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe because I have some experience in counseling and in the psychology side of things, I remember really clearly trying to figure out that idea of boundaries, and I think there's a way to balance boundaries with compassion. And we are really, really lucky. Maybe Mary, if you're still on the call, we at the BU School of Public Health have a graduate student life. There's Mary, and we have for the first time this year a wellness coordinator, and we also share with all of our faculty resources of where students can be referred if their psychological and adjustment issues are really affecting their performance. So we are really lucky in that regard. And I know other parts of the world and parts of the state and parts of the city might not have that capacity. So I think one of the things I would recommend is, if you can at all, is just to see if you can, put together a list of referral sources. And they don't even have to be local, because there's some wonderful, kind of telehealth and hotline types of opportunities out there.
And I guess I want to add, because I took Ken, I'm like blanking on his, Duckworth's class about mental health, and he's big on peer groups, peer support, really big on it, because they're free, and so I think that that's an often underutilized resource. I actually feel there could have been probably more of that at BU School Public Health, but I agree with you, Carol, the resources were excellent and very well promoted. Yeah. Jenna, do we want to call in the next?
Sure. Let's see. Let's see. Angela Hamilton, did you want to share? I can unmute you if you want to speak.
Yeah, maybe just unmute. Do I see this person still here?
She's still here. I just unmuted her.
Okay, great.
Hi, I don't exactly have much to share, but I just was wanting to share a little bit of my experience with Victoria, who'd shared that challenge, and I'm not sure if I have anything else. Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks for being here. All right, Jenna, who else do we want to hear from?
Sure. Dan Merrigan, if you wanted to speak, you shared a comment. I can unmute you.
Do it.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for this presentation. I really appreciate it. It's so important, and so good to know there's so many people who are thinking about trauma-informed education. I've always been aware that, that in my teaching, I've been teaching for 45 years, and I've always experienced, I've always known that there's at least one person, and probably more, at the beginning of any class, even prior to COVID-19 or some of the challenges we have now, that are coming into class in what you've described as a state of disequilibrium, and for that reason not able to focus. And then there are other students who are coming in, and it may not be disequilibrium, but they're in a different headspace. So what I try to do in different ways and very kind of quickly is, it's more of an acknowledgement that there's a lot going on for everyone in the room. And I kind of like to try to name it. And just so people can transition or take a few moments to kind of collect themselves, so they can be kind of present and that they're in a safe place. And then hopefully most of the time, the dynamics in the classroom foster that sense of safety and a place of comfort as well. But it's just a short little thing. Sometimes it may be a little exercise or sort of acknowledging what's happening in the world. But anyway, it was just a thought I wanted to share that I find helpful. That's all.
Thanks so much for joining here, Dan. Dan's also a faculty member at BU School of Public Health. So thank you so much for adding to the conversation. We really appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
All right, who's next, Jenna?
Sarah Wright, I can unmute you if you'd like to speak now. You should be unmuted. Sarah, did you have anything to say?
Mic wasn't working. Thank you for the conversation. I really appreciated being able to be a part of this. So I'm actually a psychologist at the University of South Carolina, and I work in our counseling center. And we've got a first-year experience program, and this year all students read the same book coming in, and they're reading the book Educated. If anybody's not familiar, it's a narrative account of some pretty intense at times family trauma that's happened. And we were concerned our instructors wouldn't be prepared, and this was even pre-COVID. And so we're actually doing a lot of training. So I put a link in the chat. I actually just had a book published. I hate the word trauma because I think everybody hears it so different. I think it's very common and overused. And what we know about the brain is that what is one person's trauma is another person's Tuesday. And so this book, the word that I use is cortisol. When a brain is so soaked with cortisol, it just doesn't operate the way it traditionally does. And my brain is one that works in pictures, so I use metaphor, and I use the metaphor of rain to talk about, like, a little bit of rain keeps us green and growing. 3 days of rain, it's a soggy, boggy mess. We're kind of irritated, but we still do our job. 10 days of rain, bridges are washing out, schools are closed, we're in emergency management mode. And so I heard one of the speakers earlier acknowledge being a first-generation college student, which I resonate with because I am as well. And so my hope was that we could help people know what is normal, that we could take the judgment out of it and give a different set of language so that professors and just humans aren't inundated with, I was traumatized. And I think, even with everything with COVID, for somebody to say I was traumatized for having to stay at home, when maybe if that's a young queer student and they had to go back home and crawl back into an unhelpful closet. And so one of the things that we had hoped on our campus was that our instructors would just have some basic knowledge and then be able to hear why some words or some phrasing is helpful. Even just the littlest thing of one of the things I had in there is like cues without use. So like, where were you? Why didn't you do this? That word "you" activates a brain to promote self-blame. And so I've definitely, I've done a lot of trainings around this and a lot of workshops. If ever anybody is interested, please feel free to send me an email. But I think so often about resources that we as mental health professionals have within our little bubble and how hard it can be to get those out to instructors. So I really appreciate the openness of this setting and how inclusive it was, because I think a lot of these are relevant for a lot of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing this book. I clicked on your Amazon link and it looks like it's coming out. It says it will be released tomorrow.
Yes. So the ebook, so printing got shut down because of COVID. Printing presses are not running. And so the ebook was released right around a month ago, and the print copy hopefully will be coming out in the next week or two. But it uses mostly storytelling because I'm a picture thinker. And so I think in my mind, I've been very grateful. One of the pieces of privilege I'm super aware of in this pandemic is access to spaces like this, access to educated, informed, aware people where I can process. And I realize how many people simply don't have that space. And so I think one of my biggest lessons as a psychologist has been the power of being present. So I think too, I hope that everybody hears that there's not like an enough that we can do. And I think sometimes just being aware and giving students a space to speak does more than I think we recognize sometimes.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing that. Well, we have just a few minutes left, and so I'm going to start wrapping it up, and I'm going to get final comments from Carol and Laura. And I just want to say how grateful I am that you all took time out of your day today to show up and have this conversation. I've definitely gotten a lot out of it. Trauma-informed education is something that I'm very passionate about personally because I struggled with hard drug substance misuse in my college years due to trauma, and I really struggled, and the resources were not there for me when I was in college. This was in 2004 when I had to drop out and go to rehab. The conversation wasn't happening. I didn't hear the word trauma until related to addiction until a couple years ago, and so it just wasn't happening. And so we have come a long way where, I can take a trauma-informed class from Carol, and where Laura, you can start really starting up these huge campus level trauma-informed conversations and programs. This is new, this is new. And I'm so grateful to even be able to have this conversation, because it is going to make a huge impact in these students' lives. Because, personally speaking, I carried around a lot of shame for a long time because I thought there's just something wrong with me because I wasn't able to go to school, not do drugs, graduate on time, get a good job. None of that happened for me. And if we can take away some of the shame and stigma for students because of this being trauma-informed, that's just going to make such a huge impact on the quality of life for our students and for our whole society. So I'm just so grateful for you all being here. This work does make a difference. And so I'm going to hear from Carol and then Laura with any final comments you might have. And thank you so much, you two, for being here. This is just wonderful. Let's see, let's unmute you. Did you get it?
No, okay.
Yep,
Hi.
you're good.
Well, thank you, Allison and Jenna, for all your hard work on this. And thank you, everybody, for your comments. And Sarah, I really like this concept of cortisoked. I think I'll talk to Mr. Amazon and order a book. I'm teaching a course called Stress is a Public Health Problem in a few weeks. So I think it'll be really kind of fun. And Allison, I must say, you struggled for a while, but you've definitely made up for it. And thank you all. And I think, as we go forward to be attempting, it's always a process to be trauma informed, because sometimes we screw up and we forget and we're having a bad day and then we give somebody a bad day. But, you know, creating those safe environments, building connection, supporting emotional regulation. If we can figure out ways to do it, you know, and share it in forum like this and with our colleagues, all the better. So, yeah. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks so much, Carol. Laura?
Yeah, so Carol, it was so nice to meet you today, and Jen as well, and Allison, thank you for moderating. And this is exciting for me because it's not often that I get to be with, let's see, I think we have like 31 total participants and talk about this important subject, and just knowing that all of you are out, you know, in your own little veins, making such great changes in the world. And I love seeing us all together and just knowing that it is a force and there's just no going back now, which is super exciting. And it just feels good to know that, and probably a lot of you relate to this, is that whatever struggles we had and whatever we overcame, and like Allison is sharing about her addiction, is now we can make the absolute most of that for others. So, you know, whatever suffering we went through is now turning into, you know, the fertilizer and the fodder for the next generation to do even better. And I think that's what we're here for, right? That's what we're here for. No matter what your beliefs are, we are here to make a difference and to improve the next. And I think we're all doing our part in that. So thanks for the opportunity to discuss.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for all of you who participated in the discussion. And I'm really hoping that we can all go back to our home institutions or our families or in our communities and really think about ways that we can move the needle to be more trauma informed. And thank you so much for helping us brainstorm and helping us create a trauma informed society. Thank you so much. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, even though there's a lot of unrest right now, and I hope that you are able to practice some self-care, and I hope that maybe being a part of this community helps a little bit to just know that we are working on these issues. You know, we are trying, and so I hope that helps you throughout your day. This is a really tough week, and thank you so much. I also want to invite you all to join the ACES Connection community, especially those of you at BU. We have a BU specific community on ACES Connection. So just go ahead and go to acesconnection.com and click the join button. To join specific communities, click the communities button, and there's geographical and interest-based communities all over. So yeah, invite all of you, and any member can post. So if you join, you can make a blog and it can be seen in front of our 40,000 members. So I want to invite you all to do that. So, okay, thank you so much. I hope that many of you join, and I hope many of you come back. Our next one is K through 12 education, and it's happening Thursday at the same time. And you can find and sign up for that on our website on the homepage. All right, everyone, have a great Tuesday.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Dan, Mary, Caitlin, all my BU buddies. Jillian.